Hi, we'll do the female reproductive system today. Let's talk a little bit about the anatomy first. If we take a look at functions, much like the male, it produces gametes, but instead of sperm, it produces ova or eggs. Maintains the developing embryo and fetus. It forms the placenta, gives birth, nourishes the infant after the birth, and production of hormones. Alright, so now let's take a look at the anatomy. The female gonad are the ovaries here, and the ovaries produce the gametes, the ova, and the hormones, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Alright, the ovaries are held onto the uterus by what's called the ovarian ligament. And the ovaries will produce the eggs, and when ready, that egg will ovulate and be released from the ovary, be caught within these little finger-like projections. The fimbriae actually doesn't really catch it, but it creates like a vortex in here, which sucks up the egg into this next portion. This is called the infundibulum, and then it passes through the uterine tube or the fallopian tube, and spends a little bit of time traveling through there until it makes its way to the uterus. Okay. There's a fundus part up here, a body of the uterus, and down here the lowermost portion of the uterus is called the cervix. The uterus has layers to it. It has an inner lining called the endometrium. This endometrium is shed monthly and during the menstrual cycle, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It's got a very thick muscle layer called the myometrium. The myometrium is just smooth muscle, giant smooth muscle. All right, from the cervix, then you pass into the vagina, which is a tube, and then to the outside. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the female menstrual cycle. As probably many of you know, females are unique or different from males in that they are born with their eggs, with all the eggs that they will have. And whereas males begin producing eggs at puberty, and that goes throughout the rest of their life, whereas females, you know, are born with their eggs, and they have this menstrual cycle until maybe in their late 40s, early 50s, where they stop the menstrual cycle or menstruation, and that's called menopause. So what happens during those months, or during that time each month where you have your period? If we take a look here, it actually all begins in the brain. The anterior pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary gland will secrete FSH and LH, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So what does follicle stimulating hormone do? It will travel into the blood to the ovary, where it will stimulate follicles. Okay, these are the structures which contain the little egg, the little immature ovum. It's actually begun the process of meiosis, and it's arrested during meiosis. And so that FSH causes that follicle to begin to develop. All right? So you have a bunch of follicles actually developing, and with several eggs developing at one time. At about day 14, ovulation will occur. So one of those eggs leaves the ovary and will travel in hopes of meeting up with a sperm. Anyway, that egg leaves, but the remaining follicle, the cells of the remaining follicle, because remember the follicle is made up of tissue plus the egg. Once the egg leaves, that remaining tissue without the egg now is called the corpus luteum. It means yellow body. I didn't have yellow, so I just did it in green. And so this structure here is a corpus luteum, made from the follicle that has lost its egg. So now the follicle, or this corpus luteum, begins producing estrogen and progesterone. All right. What does this estrogen and progesterone do? The progesterone, it maintains the endometrium. So this is my little uterus here. Looks like a cow, but it's a uterus, and the red is aligning the endometrium. And so this, the progesterone maintains the endometrium, and if there is a pregnancy, it will maintain that pregnancy. All right. If there's no pregnancy, okay, what happens? High levels of estrogen and progesterone actually inhibit the anterior pituitary gland from releasing follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, what does a luteinizing hormone do? Luteinizing hormone maintains the corpus luteum, which maintains estrogen and progesterone, which maintains the endometrium. But if estrogen and progesterone inhibit the anterior pituitary gland, that inhibits LH and FSH, which then in turn causes the corpus luteum to go away. If the corpus luteum goes away, levels of estrogen and progesterone decrease, so it can no longer maintain the endometrium. The endometrium is shed, and with low levels of estrogen and progesterone, you no longer inhibit the anterior pituitary gland. So now since it no longer inhibits it, okay, this goes away, now we can secrete FSH and LH again, and we begin the whole process. So it's a cycle. So where it acts on itself and then inhibits itself. Okay, and so each time you have the the endometrium shed. So what happens if you become pregnant? So now the little egg, after it ovulates, now will travel down, meet up with a sperm, probably in the upper third of the uterine tube, and then travel down, implant in the uterus wall, develop a placenta, and that placenta will begin secreting HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. Now, HCG is the hormone, the pregnancy hormone that's tested for in pregnancy tests. So if you have HCG, what does that do? It kind of acts like LH. So if you have HCG, no matter what's happening here, now we can maintain the corpus luteum. So if we maintain the corpus luteum, that stays around. Then our estrogen and progesterone levels remain high. Estrogen and progesterone. So that stays high. And so what does that do? If we can keep estrogen and progesterone up high, that's going to maintain the endometrium. It's not going to be shed, which will supply nutrients and maintain that fetus there. And also it will continuously inhibit the anterior pituitary gland, all right, from producing FSH. So now we can't stimulate any new follicles, and we can't have ovulation occurring. Okay, so FSH, LH continues to be inhibited. No more follicles, no more ovulation. We can't get pregnant again, and that HCG continues to maintain that externally. All right. So of course, when we don't have the HCG, then this goes ahead and inhibits this, which causes the corpus luteum to go away, decreases this, and then gets rid of the inhibition. Then we can begin again the cycle. All right. I hopefully that was helpful.